This is how I make beaver tail leather wallets. The beaver tails are already tanned. You can see they're pretty wavy. So I staple them out on a board, flatten them as much as possible. The next day when they dry, they're quite flat. So then I trace the pattern pieces and cut them out. And it's important to cut out very precisely so that all the pieces fit together as nicely as possible. And then I use an Italian cowhide leather for the rest of the wallet parts. And then any beaver tail pieces that are getting laminated onto the cowhide, those need to be traced and the leather etched and then glued together. And then placed very precisely together so that all the edges match up. The edges of the pockets need to be sanded and then dyed and need to be done before any more sewing or gluing is done, because you can't do anything to the top edges of the pockets once they're attached to the wallet. So then I mark where all the pockets are going to go so that I can glue the pockets on. And again, need to etch the leather and then glue the pieces together very precisely. Then I sew along that bottom edge on a sewing machine. This is a Juki compound feed walking foot sewing machine. And then put on the lower pocket. And this is where the previous marking and measuring is very important so that you can get those edges all aligned. And then I like to use Tokonole to shine up the leather pieces a bit, and that can be done before or after they're attached. Gives it a really nice finish. And if you want to do a drinking game, take a drink every time I say precise or precisely, but actually don't do that because you might die. And glue is really important in leather work so that the pieces don't shift as you're sewing, especially with a wallet, because the pieces need to be aligned so precisely. Once all the pieces are glued together, I bevel the edges and then sand the edges. I started with a 60 and then a 120 and then a 220 to make sure that all the edges are even and smooth. And then I like to kind of go on an angle and bevel the edges a little bit further. Sanding takes so long. There's a lot of time in sanding. And then I dye the edges with a leather dye. The marker applicator is really nice because you can be really precise. And then I sew around the edges of the wallet. Go very slowly. I put just computer paper on the underside of the wallet while I'm sewing, and that helps stop the feed dogs from marring up that underside of the leather. You can see how dull the edges are here. So I go through another sanding process to really smooth out the edges to make burnishing easier. They get dyed again if they need to be, and then Tokonole on the edges for the final burnishing. And I really cannot overstate how long the sanding process takes. I probably spent at least an hour on each wallet with all the sanding. The goal is a really high gloss finish on those edges, and the sanding is really the key. A wooden burnishing tool really finishes them up nicely. And then a little more Tokonole to polish up the other side of the wallets, and then they're done. They came out really beautifully. I do have one for sale on my website, and also if you're interested in taking some fur sewing classes, I still have openings in my classes that are going on this year, and you can find information about those on my website as well. And if you can't make it to an in-person class, then I have fur sewing patterns on my website that are for sale and video tutorials available on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. If you liked my video, then maybe follow me.